I'm Gab, he's Jules, joining us remotely from the great nation of Switzerland with its many cantons. Jules, I'm sorry to say we're still apart. I miss you, man. I miss you, bro. I would sit here and lament the fact further, but there's so much going on. We got to get right into it because we have our two Club World Cup finalists. One of them is Chelsea, who beat Fluminense 2-0. Funny enough, that is not the main segment. The main segment, of course, is Paris Saint-Germain's demolition of Real Madrid.
Yeah, it was an incredible performance again, and I know we will repeat ourselves again from what we said after the Champions League final, or even after many games from PSG in the last few weeks and few months, but they were just incredible again. And yeah, Real Madrid made two massive mistakes, Asensio and Rudiger earlier on, that cost them a lot. But even before that, PSG could have been 2-0 up without two really good saves from Thibaut Courtois. And it's just an incredible machine that Luis Enrique has created. And Xabi Alonso is at the beginning of his journey. Luis Enrique is 2 years on into his journey, and I think that could be seen in that performance. But again, individually, collectively, PSG were incredible.
Well, you talk about how we don't want to repeat ourselves. So I guess we'll have to talk more about Real Madrid in this one because I'm going to come right out and say it. I did not understand Xabi Alonso's lineup. I understand why he was kind of forced into it with absences and stuff, although he did have, of course, Camavinga and Ceballos on the bench. But to this business with experimenting, let me put Vini on the other wing. If Vini and Mbappe plus Bellingham doesn't work defensively, how do you think Vini plus Mbappe plus a center forward like Gonzalo Garcia plus Bellingham plus Arda Güler, who is still learning the number 8 position, how do you think that's going to work?
It's not going to work, Gab, and it didn't work. And I agree with you. That made no sense whatsoever from Xabi Alonso. And again, we can put that on the fact that it's early in his tenure there, and he's still working things out and figuring things out and how to play the best way. And we saw the kind of hybrid Tchouaméni back 3, back 4, midfield, etc. earlier. That worked really well at time. He clearly felt that was not the right option for this game, but he went for something that was even worse. So I'm not sure what he tried to do. And I think he got lucky because PSG could have won this game 6-0, and that would have been even worse for him. So now I think he's lucky in a way of being this is the beginning. He can make mistakes. People will forgive him for mistakes, but that it didn't make any sense. And to be fair, the players looked completely lost in that game, and especially against a team like PSG. I guess you can experiment against a team that is not as strong collectively and as well drilled as this Paris side, but not in a game like this, not against them.
No, I agree. In fact, 20 minutes in during the Champions League final, Mark Ogden, who I was sitting next to, immediately asked our sort of stats and information people, what is the heaviest defeat ever in a Champions League final? And last night he was at the MetLife Stadium again. 20 minutes in on the group chat, he starts asking, what is the heaviest defeat in the history of Real Madrid? Because it certainly looked like it was heading that way, as you mentioned, Thibaut Courtois making those 2 stunning saves. And to me, this kind of invalidates the argument about, I always give people a pass for individual errors. They can happen, 2 massive brain farts, one each from Raúl Asensio and Antonio Rudiger. But Paris Saint-Germain were just scything through them. By the way, heaviest defeat in Real Madrid history, March 5th, 1930, Espanyol 8, Real Madrid 1. Yes, there was a time when Real Madrid were nowhere near as good as they have been for the last half century. Jules, when I look at this, I think we also need to know about Paris Saint-Germain, and we will give Real Madrid both barrels. We will talk about Luka Modric. We'll talk about Rodrigo. Sad to see Luka Modric's career end this way, but the fact is, if your final tournament with a club is a knockout tournament, it will most likely end with you losing the game. Let's also remind people, Paris Saint-Germain were without their first option at center back, and arguably, possibly without their second option as well.
Who's the second option?
Well, I was imagining Lucas Hernandez to make it more effective. I know it would have been Beraldo, but still.
You're right. No, Pacho, who's suspended. And the fact that this was the first game that Ousmane Dembele actually started for PSG in this competition because he was injured when they arrived. He was not really fully fit, fully ready in the semi-final and the quarterfinals. That's why he only came on in the second halves in those 2 games. So Luis Enrique not trolling Real Madrid at the end, but saying also, by the way, I know this was great and we're in the final, yet another final, potentially another trophy. But we also did it without our best player for so far 80% of this competition.
Real Madrid fans, I have you covered if you don't want to listen to what is sure to be a takedown from Jules and me given yesterday's performance. Please feel free to fast forward 10 minutes or so. But before that, we do have a little more Paris Saint-Germain talk to talk about. Now, I don't, my thoughts on the Ballon d'Or are very, very well known. But I'm going to hand it over to you, Jules, because even grumpy Mark Ogden made the point that Ousmane Dembele, at this point, with yesterday's performance, may well have locked us up.
Yeah, I think so. I think he had before anyway, for me personally. But I think what he's done in the final and semi-final, and again, it's not just so much the goal or the assist from yesterday or the one against Bayern Munich right at the end. It's also everything that he does off the ball and the leadership that he has for this team. And Luis Enrique again said it last night after the game. He said, on top of everything well that he does and the goals and everything that he's been doing in 2025, which is incredible again, 35 goals, 14 assists in 52 games. It's a remarkable tally. But it's also everything else, and the fact that he takes his team to winning trophies because he's decisive in all those big games. We said semi-final last night of the Club World Cup, quarterfinals of the Club World Cup, and then pretty much every round of the knockout stages of the Champions League, he was there either with a goal or an assist against Liverpool, against Villa, against Arsenal, even Brest before that, if you want. And then obviously the final where he haunted all the Inter Milan defenders and goalkeepers. He created 2 goals and he was there all along. And yeah, he didn't score in that final, but he'd been so important. And I know Rafinha has had a good season and Lamine Yamal is wonderful. And there are others. Mo Salah as well had a great year with Liverpool in the Premier League. But just nobody can right now even contest the fact that Ousmane Dembele is the best player in the world and he's the best player of the best team in the world as well.
Yeah, so I don't want to delve too far into this, but I feel my point, as you know, I do not care. However, what I think is pretty striking about this Paris Saint-Germain and may impact Dembele's Ballon d'Or is that you could actually pull out a whole bunch of other candidates based on what we know of how Ballon d'Or voters tend to vote. And let's not forget, my view, many of them live in like a little la-la land of YouTube and Champions League finals and nothing else. You could make it, people have made a case, Désiré Doué, even though he really only came on in the second part of the season with all those big goals, to the point that, we had Mark even talking about, Doué against Lamine Yamal, the next player, next GOAT conversation, skipping over Dembele altogether. We've also had Gigi Donnarumma's agent making a case, funnily enough, for his client, because without his big saves, Paris Saint-Germain may not have won the Champions League. You could also make a strong case, I think, for Achraf Hakimi as well. And let's not forget Vitinha. Now, when Real Madrid don't win, when one of their guys doesn't win, people often say, because people think that, I guess, Ballon d'Or voters are Muppets who block vote, that, but look, so-and-so took votes away from so-and-so on the same team, blah, blah, blah. Do you think that might be the case here? Do you think that people who've been so enamored, so inspired by Paris Saint-Germain that they want to reward a Paris Saint-Germain player, they may actually say, no, Dembele was fantastic, but Hakimi was more important, or Donnarumma was more important, or Vitinha was more important, or Désiré Doué. Is this a thing, you think?
Yeah, maybe. Although I think as great as they've all been, and you're right, you mentioned all of them. And
Nuno Mendes, too. He ain't going to win, but still.
Yeah, absolutely. I still think that everybody acknowledges and realizes how that Dembele is still the leader of that team and still the main guy and the guy that makes it all happen with everybody behind him. But this is a wonderful team. As we say that, they might take a few votes away from a few points, because I think you will see a lot of top fives with a few PSG players in them. And that's it. If you can have Dembele first and Hakimi second and Lamine and Rafinha third, for example, that is fine, but that doesn't really hinder too much Dembele's chances of winning it in the end. So we'll have to see, and obviously we'll know the nominees very soon at the beginning of August, and then this will all happen at the beginning of September. So there's not much time anyway between now and this Club World Cup final, for example, and all the votes and the whole Ballon d'Or machine, if you want, kicking in. So we will see, but I still think he's so clear ahead of everybody else and everyone else that he will still win it.
All right, here we go. Real Madrid fans, look away now or fast forward now. I want to start. There's so much blame to go around for this. And I think this is one of the situations where you can blame Real Madrid while also praising Paris Saint-Germain. Doesn't take anything away, pointing out Real Madrid's flaws in this game. But I want to start with blaming somebody who didn't play in this game because he got himself suspended. There's a parallel universe where Dean Huysen remembers that they're 3-1 up 6 minutes into injury time and does not pull down Serhou Guirassy against Borussia Dortmund in the semifinal, and therefore does not get suspended for this game. And with Huysen available to Xabi Alonso, he would have partnered Rudiger at the back. I would assume Trent Alexander-Arnold, of course, out at right back. I would assume Raul Asensio would have played right back, which would have given them a defensive option over on the right. And I would assume Valverde would have gone into midfield, which meant that you would have had somebody with legs who at least puts in effort. I don't want to pick on a kid, but Dean Huysen has looked so mature. This was a major sign of immaturity or a major mental error to which we're not accustomed. I think this had a major impact, not in Real Madrid going out necessarily, but in the ease with which Paris Saint-Germain tore Real Madrid apart.
Yeah, certainly they would have been better defensively with Huysen in there, with Rudiger. Asensio has had a shockingly bad Club World Cup tournament, really, if you think about all the mistakes that he made, the penalty he gave away, the fouls that he made, the red cards, and etc. And that showed as well, I think, in the final that he was not to make that mistake so early on. Like, he didn't even again before that, he was all over the place defensively when PSG had those early chances too, and 0-0. So it's true that Huysen would have helped for sure. I don't know how much the rest of the formation from Xabi Alonso. I suspect he would have still played with that weird front three of Garcia, Mbappe, and Vinicius. I still think overall he would not have worked tactically what he tried to do in the game, even with Huysen in the back four instead of Asensio. But certainly, Huysen better player than Asensio for sure.
Yeah, certainly. I want to go back to this we have to go back to this for a minute. You've got Mbappe, who probably still not fully fit. And he's worth to be part of the conversation, obviously, with his gastroenteritis, losing, 12, 13 pounds, something like that. He goes back to the left. Vini goes to the right, where it's a position where you cannot go into, obviously, you can't go into a stronger foot when he comes inside. What I found most remarkable is you've got, so we've been talking, I'll talk all of last season, you have two guys who do not work effectively off the ball. We saw a little bit from Mbappe later in the season from a center forward position. But this is just not their thing. It's not what they do. Maybe they will one day, but not right now. And these guys who do not work on the ball and do not track back are paired against arguably the best fullback pairing in the world in Achraf Hakimi and Nuno Mendes. That is basically, to me, that is inviting on the build-up play. That is inviting Paris Saint-Germain into your midfield, where they are met by Chouameni and a guy who has basically never played as an 8 until very recently, in Arda Güler, or very rarely played as an 8, and a guy, Bellingham, who sees himself as a number 10 and has played number 10 the best part of the last two seasons. This seems frankly suicidal. And as much as we're going to blame the Real Madrid back four for their individual errors, it's also because there's no filter whatsoever in midfield.
Yeah, I think they were exposed, obviously, too easily, too much, and that midfield three just didn't work. And we saw Arda Güler having some really good performances in this Club World Cup in this midfield, and we said, like, could this be his position? Could he be the next kind of Modric, certainly for the quality of passing than anything else? Sure, maybe he can. He still has a long way to go and a lot of work to be done, as we saw in that game, because they were put under so much pressure. And again, they played against one of the best midfields in the world, really, if not the best midfield in the world right now. And Vitinha, João Neves, and Ruiz are so good, and they're so used to play with each other, and they're so used to play in this kind of system for PSG, and that fluidity and that rotation and the relationism that they have is incredible. So it was always going to be a hard task for any Real Madrid midfield anyway in that game. But yeah, that one didn't work. And then to think that front three could somehow disrupt the PSG defense and rhythm, I'm not really sure what really convinced Xabi Alonso to do that. I mean, I don't think Gonzalo Garcia was bad, to be fair. He tried to help. He played a bit as the 10 sometimes, tried to hold the ball up. But the two wingers, Mbappe and Vinicius, were just never in the game. I think one did 10 passes in 17 minutes. The other one was 12 passes in the game. It's ridiculous numbers, really, for players like them. They just were never in the game at all.
Okay, I'm going to try to project forward a little bit here. I think we want to give Real Madrid some good news as well. Eder Militao at the end, when he came on, he certainly showed a lot of will, a lot of leadership, a lot of aggression. If he gets fit and he can stay fit, I think the defense is sorted, and I think you can actually start thinking maybe even of a back three at that stage. I'm just projecting forward, imagining what's going through Xabi Alonso's head. And so I think that's maybe less of an issue. Where I still see a lot of problems, though, is how the pieces fit together in midfield and up front. And maybe you can reinvent Arda Güler as an 8. Maybe you can get a little bit more steel in there with Camavinga. But then you still have to find a place for Bellingham. And then you still have the fundamental problem of Vini and Mbappe. And I'm going to come out and say this. Are they better off? And we've seen him do this, certainly by Leverkusen last season, where he almost said, all right, I'm just going to stiffen up the midfield, not concede, and kind of give my attacking players, well, mainly Florian Wirtz, a lot of license and a lot of freedom. Is that where we're heading? And if that's where we're heading, Jules, do I need Xabi Alonso to do that?
I think he likes the back three with Tchouaméni in there, because then you can come into midfield and have that position that we saw in the quarterfinals and the semifinal, that in the quarterfinals and the last 16, that worked really well for them. And I think Tchouaméni can do that, certainly more than with a traditional back three. I think that could also be an option. And then you can have Güler and Bellingham and Valverde in your midfield, and then Tchouaméni stepping in there, that pushes Bellingham a bit further, and then you have a front two, and you choose whatever you front two you like best. Mbappe, Vinicius, Mbappe, Garcia, Vinicius, Garcia, whatever you want. Rodrigo in there if you want to, although clearly Xabi Alonso doesn't think that he's any good for anything, because he hasn't played for 5 games now at all, not even a single minute. And then you have your 2 wing backs in Alexander-Arnold and Fran Garcia, or Ferland Mendy, or even Carreras when he signs, which fits there really, really well. So there's a few options for them. It's just he will have to sort out. For me, defensively or in midfield, he can find a solution. There's so many options, like you mentioned Camavinga too. You can have a bit of Ceballos. There's a lot of things that you can do that make your defense and your midfield good. Really, it's up front that he will have to decide and find the right combination. If you go with a 2, can you really play with Vinicius and Mbappe as a 2? If you want to go with a 2, is Gonzalo Garcia a really good option or not? Is he ready for a full season, not just a few games there like he did in his Club World Cup, where he was good and scored goals and was important for the team, but can he do that through the whole season in the Champions League, in big games against Barcelona, in La Liga, all those kind of stuff? I'm not so sure, but I'm not so sure that a front two of Mbappe and Vinicius in this kind of system also works, and is also something that where they could be good at, both of them together. So and we don't even talk about pressing and counter pressing and what you do off the ball without the possession. So there's a lot of work to do for him, and I think it's quite daunting to think about all those things that he will have to sort out.
Yeah, I mean, at one point I was almost wondering, is he doing this to kind of send a message to Florentino? Hey, we need to open the wallet again and get things going, and maybe move somebody out. You mentioned Rodrigo there. 5 games, he gets asked about it. He addresses it. 5 games on the bench. I don't even know why he bothered taking him to the Club World Cup. I think the trickiest thing with Rodrigo is that you have a player coming for Real Madrid, so the wages are going to be significant. Although probably not out of this world, because he signed when he was very young. But Real Madrid, for prestige, if nothing else, with all their Champions League titles and whatever else, they're going to demand a big numbers. 100 million has been floated in the Madrid press. I think that's nonsense. But even 60, 70, what are you getting?
It's a good question, Gab. I mean, 90, 100, no, don't even think about it. Nobody's going to pay that. And I think they just know that. For lower than that, at 60 is the price that seems to be going for players for wingers like him. You know, Olise was that price. Nico Williams really close was that price. I think Luis Diaz price would be around that. I think Barcola, if PSG had allowed him to go, probably would be around that kind of price. Maybe a little bit more, but still around that price. So this is the price for wingers anyway. And there's no way Rodrigo would go for more than that. You get players who start from the left-hand side. I think his favorite position where he's been the best. And he's really good. He's got pace. He's a smart kid. He's good with both feet, but especially with the right foot. So all of that kind of works really well. But again, he's been playing in a team that has been so successful because a team that was so good. Can he go to another club and be a leader? If you spend that much money on a player, he has to be one of your best players. He has to be a leader. He has to come in and be decisive again. And I'm not sure Rodrigo. I just don't know. I don't think anybody knows really if Rodrigo can step up like that and have that kind of responsibilities and take them on and go like, yeah, I can be your leader, because he's never done. He never had to do it really at Real Madrid. There was always other leaders, and he was just the guy there in the team that was really good and was a big component of that team, but still not the main guy. So I'm just not sure he can do that.
Hey, I'm going to throw this out there early. We're going to get to Nani Madueke later. But if the argument about why Arsenal suddenly need Nani Madueke and are willing to go in the £50 million range for him, potentially, possibly, is that they could use a winger who can play on both flanks. Hey, look, there's Rodrigo. Here's a guy who can play on both flanks, a guy who's obviously a winner. Just look at what he's won. A guy who, you know, you made the point about needing to be a leader and he hasn't another team he goes to. Well, at Arsenal, I'm not saying Arsenal are like Real Madrid, but Arsenal are not lacking for leaders in Saliba, in Saka, in Odegaard, Declan Rice, and so on. So he wouldn't necessarily need to be the main man straight away. I'm just chucking it out there. I'm sure they've thought of it. I'm sure he's been offered to them. Let's see how this unfolds. We have to talk about Luka Modric, though. Look, we've done so many tributes. We've done tributes when it announced he was leaving at the end of the season and so on. He's leaving. He's going to join Milan. We don't know how that's going to work out at Milan, what he has left to give and what role Max Allegri has for him. Jules, what a player for so long, struggled at the beginning, and then became, from my view, possibly the best midfielder since that Zinedine Zidane champ.
Yeah, club legend, of course. Club GOAT, even if you want. One of the greatest that they've ever had. 13 seasons, everything that he won. The 5 Champions League, of course. They, 3 titles, 3 trophies, 3 La Liga titles, or 4 La Liga titles. 4, the Copa del Rey that he won, just everything. But not just everything. It's not just the titles, not just the trophies. It's just the way he conducted himself, obviously, the player that he was, the genius that he was on the ball. Just this midfield engine and creator that just made everything ticked and everything linked together. Really, that whatever front three he had ahead of him was obviously amazing, but then he made that work, and he also made the defense work, and just everything. What a wonderful player. Yeah,
and it's easy. And just to you said it beautifully there. Just the one thing, just to top it off, that I would add is, if you're a younger fan and you've seen him, you probably think of Modric first in terms of his passing and his creativity and whatnot, because you saw old Modric. But what I can tell you is, he may look like Johan Cruyff's sort of wussier little brother, but when you use the word engine there, so appropriate. Up until 5 or 6 years ago, Modric was often the guy who, covered the most kilometers on the pitch. And for, again, a physically smaller, not imposing player, he had some real steel about him. He really was a midfield warrior. And it's almost like there were 2 phases of his career. Now that he's older, obviously he can't do the same sort of things. But what a servant he's been to the club. I know some people, when I say, oh, he's the greatest midfielder since Zidane, some people might come out and say, no, what about Toni Kroos? And okay, fine. That's a very legitimate position. Jude Bellingham, might say, hold my beer, give me a couple years here, but that's fine. But for now, I don't think there's any question Luka Modric belongs in the Pantheon.